The Crane Mutiny is the 5th episode of the 6th season of Cheers. This is directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And it's a really great episode. I feel like it's been quite a while since we had an episode that focused on Frasier and Lilith, and I absolutely adore this one. I think there are so many great moments, and of course I will mention those as we go through them. It starts off with Woody coming into the bar. He's found an apartment. He's staying in Chinatown. This later comes up because he's learning a new Chinese word every day from his landlady, and she teaches him the word for doorknobs, which is rather delightful. And we then cut to the next scene after the intro. And the pretzel guy comes in, and I guess kind of out of habit, he goes to Sam. Sam confirms the order. Rebecca comes out. She's not happy because she's in charge now and all of the orders should go through her. And then she takes down Sam's picture, which is going to hurt. Frasier then comes in, and apparently he's been in a fight with Lilith because Lilith keeps saying, "We need to get married or we're through." And it sounds manipulative when I say it like that, but I guess what Lilith means is marriage is important to me, so unless that's where we're heading, what's the point of continuing? I feel like that's an explanation to soften what does otherwise seem quite manipulative. And Frasier begins to worry that he's just settling for Lilith. And he does at one point say he's too young for marriage. Does he forget what happened with Diane? Clearly, apparently. And Cliff and Norm decide to actually have a bit of fun with this. They convince Frasier that Rebecca is interested in Frasier. And when Frasier is looking at Rebecca, Cliff is standing behind him and he kind of points to his lip, and that makes Rebecca lick her lips because she thinks she has something on her lips. And it's a wonderful moment. And Frasier's face, his expression is fabulous because he thinks she's trying to seduce him, and he tries to approach her when she goes into her office, but instead he ends up just asking where the toilets are. So that didn't exactly go according to plan. Rebecca then puts up her own photo, and when her back is turned, Carla and Sam take turns doodling on it. It's an absolutely gorgeous photo of Kirstie Alley. I do love it. And then Frasier comes back into the bar, and he's told Lilith, in fact, I quote, "I've just told Lilith I want my freedom so I can pursue the fair Rebecca." It seems like, honestly, it seems very impulsive for Frasier. That's not to say Frasier doesn't do things impulsively sometimes, but he seems to be a lot more logical in his approaches rather than impulsive, and he hasn't really thought this through. There is not really any logic to his actions. It's a lot more emotionally driven, and it turns out that he didn't even tell Lilith this. He just wrote it in a letter, which does seem like something Frasier would do. And he goes to Rebecca's office again, and this time he does tell her, in not so many words, that he wants to date her, and her response is, "Who are you?" Which is interesting in two ways. The first way is that it's just very, very funny. But the other way it's interesting is that it's really confirming the fact that Rebecca doesn't treat her customers the way Sam does or did. Sam knows everybody in the bar. Sam can have a conversation with anybody in the bar. And Frasier is a regular, and yet Rebecca doesn't know who he is. She's clearly got no interest in knowing who he is. And it really highlights just how different their approaches are with owning the bar and how they're interacting with customers, which I thought was pretty interesting. Frasier realizes that Rebecca has no interest in him, and he rushes home to get the note, and it doesn't seem like Lilith's seen it. She calls out to him, "What was that, Tootsie Roll?" which is absolutely adorable. And Frasier thinks that she hasn't seen the envelope, and then she reveals that she had seen it, but she was waiting until he got home to open it. All of this is so convincing. She assumed it was just theatre tickets to the opera. Honestly, that seems logical. And then Frasier decides that since she knows what it must be, he's going to give her another surprise. And he tears it up and just proclaims, "Look, it's a flock of seagulls." I've never known such desperation before. And as soon as he's scattered the flock of seagulls, she throws water on him and she calls him a licentious quack, which is fantastic. And needless to say, Lilith had read the letter and she makes him confess why and what had happened, at least what had happened from Frasier's perspective, and that there is another woman, but he doesn't exactly tell the truth, that this was just somebody he'd just learned could be interested in him, and he admits that her name is Rebecca Howe. And Lilith replies, so now we know the slut's name. Not a huge fan of Rebecca being called a slut, but it is very entertaining within the context of the episode and Lilith's response to this. They try and talk things out, and then Lilith declares, I'm going to go out and wander the streets aimlessly. I'll take my usual route. I love the fact that that implies that she so frequently needs to wander the streets aimlessly that she has a usual route. And I love it. We're then back at Cheers, and we have an interesting moment with Sam, actually, because Rebecca tells Sam, I don't want you to doodle on my picture anymore. And she actually listens to Sam very briefly, because Sam tells Rebecca he'll give her some advice on how to deal with her staff, and he does, and he's talking about compromise because Rebecca agrees, okay, fine, we'll sort the picture out, and it seemed easy. So Sam tries a little harder, and he says, I want to sleep with you 25 times, you want to sleep with me none at all, what's off 25? And without missing a beat, Rebecca replies, your IQ. And what Sam says next, I actually think is really eye-opening. He says, I'm a little sensitive about people making fun of my intelligence. And my first thought, my immediate thought, was that's because of Diane. And I feel like Diane was constantly pointing out that I don't think she intended it to come across this way. Maybe she did. But she always seemed to point out that he was inferior intellectually. And to be honest, she didn't need to point that out. I think Sam already knows that he couldn't match her academically, intellectually, but she was constantly making it known, particularly in front of other people. And I think it has given Sam this anxiety about people thinking he's less than intelligent. And I find that rather sad, actually. And I really felt for Sam in that moment. Lilith then comes in and she approaches the bar and she says what she thinks to Rebecca. And once again, Rebecca points out she has no idea who Frasier is. And Lilith really quickly realised what Frasier was up to. And we have this nice moment of bonding between Lilith and Rebecca. And it's really the first time Rebecca's had a pleasant exchange with one of the gang at Cheers, or almost a member of the gang at Cheers. Lilith, over time, definitely becomes more involved, but she never really seemed to spend that much time at Cheers on her own. But it's nice to see Rebecca having a positive interaction with somebody, even if it didn't start out that way. Frasier then comes running in, and Lilith decides to have a bit of fun with this. She tells Frasier that she hasn't spoken to Rebecca Howe about this, and that Frasier has to end it now with Rebecca, and Lilith has to witness it. And this is just so beautiful because they go into Rebecca's office and Rebecca quite quickly realises what Lilith is up to, and Frasier has to pretend to break it off with Rebecca, and Rebecca plays along, and Frasier kind of ruined things by saying that he also couldn't live without Rebecca's kisses. I feel like that's really the only bit of the episode that I don't like. I feel like that's not how I think Frasier would have responded. Clearly it is how Frasier responded, but I feel like in that moment he was doing anything to get Lilith back on his side, that he wouldn't just throw himself at Rebecca. It seemed a little bit strange to me. But nevertheless, it played out in a way that ultimately ended up being really great, because Frasier ends up proposing to Lilith in Cheers. I love the fact that the proposal took place in the bar, and Lilith says yes, and Frasier says yippee, and it was an absolute delight. So I rather enjoyed that a lot, and Norman Cliff had a nice little moment where they kind of took credit for what happened, because it was their meddling that led Frasier to ultimately doing this, and it was a nice way to end an otherwise very chaotic episode. Delightful, but chaotic. Great moments here with Sam and Rebecca, and Also, of course, with Frasier and Lilith. So I'm rather happy. Personal highlights, absolutely some moments with Sam. I really, really moved by Sam saying he's sensitive about people making fun of his intelligence. I absolutely love Diane beyond words, but she definitely does a lot of damage. She damaged Frasier. She damaged Sam. It's not great. It doesn't look good for Diane, but nevertheless, absolutely love her. And I also love Lilith, so I'm really happy that she and Frasier are currently moving in a forwards direction. And ultimately, the Crane Mutiny is, of course, a really great episode of Cheers.